Okay, I am calling to order the Finance and Administration Committee of the Board of Directors of Marin Water for May 26, 2022. And I believe directors are coming from a closed session, so maybe we will actually call the roll in just a moment. Or maybe we'll just have you call the roll slowly, Terry.
Okay, slowly. Director Bragman.
He's here. I think he's here.
Yeah.
Director Schmidt,
Here.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Here.
and Chair Kohler.
I'm here. Okay, I am now looking for a motion to adopt the agenda for this meeting.
Move approval of the agenda.
Sounds like that was Jack. Now I need a second.
Second.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on adopting the agenda?
There are none.
Okay, then we need a roll call.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Chair Kohler.
Aye. Do we have any public comment on items that are not on the agenda, Terry?
Yes. Mimi Willard. Go ahead, Miss Willard.
Yes, good morning. So I would like to talk about the need for a disciplined approach to your use of capital. Last year was, the last a year and a half have been an extraordinary period with the drought, lots of spending, pulled down of reserves, et cetera. And I think it's really important now in this a more normal period to be looking very carefully about highest and best uses of capital. As such, I think that you really need to be looking at things within that context. In the last year, we had 3 workshops that were inconclusive. We now have another consultant study that's underway. So I think we should not be adding any new major water sufficiency initiatives to the capital plan until we have the outcome of all of that. So against this backdrop, I see that we now have $25 million in potential spending lined up here for approval within the capital budget on AMI. And that's the second large item, not far behind the Mount Payne Tunnel project, which is a very worthy project. And then meanwhile, you decided to table, I thought you decided to table all new spending on new water security and sufficiency initiatives. And that was the reason given for rebuffing staff's suggestion that Measure S repeal be put on the June ballot, which seemed like it could be an urgency issue in that it would have made possible temporary desal in the event of a resumed drought emergency. So I think you need to have a consistent approach here. Either you're going to go ahead and spend willy-nilly, or you're going to go in a disciplined fashion in which you await the results of your consultant study. You debate it as a board. You tee up what are your priorities. And I think in the absence of doing that, then the question inevitably will arise in public's mind as to what's the hurry to go ahead with AMI. And this will raise a lot of questions as to whether the real agenda here is using the spyware abilities of it in order to manage demand with real-time enforcement and fines. So I think you need to take a vote on striking this element from the capital plan. I also would just mention, it's important also to send the signal that you're watching your pennies, and $500,000 for flush toilets at Lake Lagunitas doesn't make any sense at all within that context, since none of the other local parks or recreation areas have flush toilets. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further comments.
I'm sorry, did you say there are no more public comments?
That is correct. There are none.
Okay. Then we are moving on to the calendar, and the first item of business is approval of the minutes of the last meeting from April. Do I have a motion?
I think there was an error in the minutes. It shows me as non-attending. I believe I was at that meeting.
Okay.
No, you were there. You weren't there at the beginning, but then you showed up later.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion to amend it and approve the minutes as amended.
Jack, and I second that. I think the minutes did include a note that you arrived a little later after the meeting had begun.
Oh, okay, I didn't.
Yeah, so you're in there. It's just
Okay.
you're not at the beginning, so.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
on page 2 of the minutes that you arrived.
Okay,
Okay.
So I seconded your motion.
okay.
Okay. Do we have any public comment on the minutes?
There are none.
Okay, then we need a roll call on this approval item.
Director Bregman,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Okay,
and Chair Kohler.
Hi. Item 2 is a resolution allowing continuation of virtual board and committee meetings pursuant to Assembly Bill 361. Who is presenting?
That would be me, Chair Kohler. Good morning, board members and public. This is a fairly routine matter that we've been undertaking for some time now since the adoption of AB 361 to allow continuation for meeting virtually during the pandemic. I just thought I'd bring this item to a report session so that the board could ask questions, or if there were comments, we had that opportunity. We are seeing a bit of an uptick as of late on our COVID-19 positive cases in Marin and in the surrounding areas. I can attest that Sonoma County is experiencing that as well. So, and given that circumstance, along with the fact that we have limited space in our boardroom to socially distance, staff is continuing to recommend the adoption of a resolution allowing continuation of virtual meetings. We are going to keep an eye on the situation as it evolves, as we have been for some time now. And the next opportunity for the board to consider this item would then be June 21st, regular board meeting. So with that, we are looking for an action today, but please feel free to ask questions, or if there are any comments, we're welcoming those as well.
I have a question. Have we done any inventory? Do we have any sense of what's going on in the county in general, meeting wise? In other words, are there city council meetings in real time? Other sanitary districts, et cetera. Do we know what other people are doing on this? I guess is my question.
Yes, Director Gibson. I mean, we've been trying to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on. I think it's been a couple of months, and I'm not sure if people have been reverting back to virtual meetings. I think that there's been a mix. The county has been in person for some time, but does require masks and also allows virtual participation by the public. I don't know, Terry, if you have any more detail on that.
Not necessarily with other cities, but definitely other water agencies and special districts are also, there was an email that went out yesterday wanting to know what everyone else is doing. So for the most part, we're all still doing virtual. But
sent the email?
But we're looking into doing, but they're looking into doing in person.
Who sent the email?
East Bay Mud.
Interesting. I think it would be worthwhile talking to the Marin County Health Officer
Okay.
and getting an opinion from him. I think this is a time to be extra cautious.
Yeah.
Not cavalier.
Yeah.
I just went to their daily update, and it does show increasing reports of cases, which I think generally are underreported now because most people are probably testing at home anyway. So you really don't get you don't get the full picture. So, I think we need to keep it up and, really for staff, to protect them from being exposed. And, our meeting room is rather cramped. And so, I just think it's the right thing to do. So.
I'll just say I agree, and an extra, although I think lesser consideration is I'm hearing from a number of constituents how much they appreciate the virtual meetings because it really allows for people to participate much more effectively. It's a little counterintuitive, but being able to be in the comfort of your own space and just sign in as you are able to, I think it's really facilitated public participation for a lot of people, especially older people who, really are not going to make the trip. Health considerations primary, but just secondarily, they're just not going to, they don't feel comfortable doing it. So I think it's another reason to consider it. Do we have any public comment on this item? I'm sorry, are we done with board comment? I thought we were. Okay, public comment on this item?
There are none.
Okay, then I'm looking for a motion.
I'd move.
Let me add one more thing, Cynthia. I think it's also it's in having the meetings remotely accessible goes along with our greenhouse gas reduction.
Good point.
So, we aren't moving people unnecessarily. I mean, what difference does it make if the person's sitting in our audience or they're sitting at home on Zoom? Really, it might be a little more effective in person, but I think it's something. This is a sign of the times, and this is the way the times are moving. And I have spoken to everybody about this. In the legal business, my word coming back to me is that Zoom depositions are here to stay. They may not be all Zoom, but this has caused a change in our business structure. And I think we need to recognize that.
Yeah.
And I'll point out
Sorry.
quickly that there are a couple of pieces of legislation pending for some permanent changes, and we'll keep an eye on those as well to allow for greater accommodation of virtual participation. So
Yeah, and
Great.
the courts are still allowing and promoting virtual participation in criminal cases for the most part. They've started doing in person for in custody cases, but for most other cases, most other criminal cases and civil cases, we're still on Zoom. So we're not alone by a long
Do you
shot.
have to be able to see the jurors?
Guys, in
We,
the interest of time, can we move this along? We've got a bunch of
Yeah,
items. I think we're all in agreement.
I just finished participating in a live jury trial. So juries are meeting. Everybody's masked up. So that's how it goes.
Okay, can I call for a motion, please?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Chair Kohler.
Aye. The third item is a request for Marin County Elections to perform election services for this November.
Yes, so this is a review and referral for board approval. The terms of office for directors in divisions 1, 3, and 4 are up this year. They run through December 2022. And so staff's requesting for the Marin County Elections to perform election services for us.
Okay, do we have any board comment on this item?
No, other than the election services that we're specifying are for election to the board, correct?
That's correct.
Can that be modified if the board wants to put something on the ballot?
as far as adding an initiative,
Yeah,
I think there's still maybe time to add an
Yes.
initiative if there's interest in that. Yes.
okay, all right. I'd move approval.
Second.
Okay, do we have any public comment on this item?
There are none.
Okay, then a roll call vote, please.
Director Bragman,
Aye.
Director Russell,
Aye.
Director Schmidt,
Aye.
Vice Chair Gibson,
Aye.
and Chair Kohler.
Aye. Item 4 is an update on the capital improvement program for the next fiscal years.
Good morning, Directors. Crystal Yesman, Director of Engineering. As we approach the end of the fiscal year, this is a really good time to look at the projects that we've accomplished this year that we're currently in design and construction on. And then looking ahead into the next fiscal year, which begins in July 1st, this is the time in which we plan out what projects we're going to be moving forward on for the next fiscal year. So I'm really excited to show this presentation today. The engineering staff and team have worked really hard over the last few months to put this together for you. And let me share my screen and I will get started. There we go. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Mhm.
Great. Okay. So first, let's just take a look at the historical and current capital projects and the trends that we've had. Over the years, we've averaged about $26 million a year in investments. We had a little bit of a slowdown in 18, 19, 19, 20 because of some key retirements. We had 2 or 3 engineering staff. We have a very small, lean engineering staff of about 8 or 9 folks. And so we started building back up. And of course, this fiscal year, 21, 22, we had some increased investments, especially around the drought efforts. So, and then
Crystal,
looking
I hate
at,
to interrupt you, but I don't think your slides are moving.
oh, please, here we go. Sorry, guys. Thank you. All right, so back to the histogram. So yeah, on average, about 26 million a year, and a bit of a slowdown in 18, 19, 19, 20 because of some key retirements and resource issues. But then the drought hit, and we've had some additional investments this year, which I'll get into, and then what we're projecting for next year. And I will talk about what these projects are and the funding behind them. So moving forward. Just first off, some of the projects that we actually completed this fiscal year, which runs July 1st of 2021 to June 30th of this year, it's coming up. Sir Francis Drake was a key project in conjunction with the city, different cities. We removed over 8,500 feet of pipe aging up to 100 years old. The pipe ranged in size from 4 inches up to 20 inches. This was in conjunction with a paving project so that we were able to reduce the impacts to the community. Another project I'd like to highlight is the Southern Marin pipeline. This one just completed in Tiburon, Belvedere. It's in conjunction with Belvedere's earthquake resiliency project. And we replaced 5,580 feet of pipe that was installed as early as 1924. And it's along Cove Road and Lagoon Road right there in Tiburon. Another big project this year, Castanya Pump Station. You know, when the drought was in its peak, we fast-tracked this project to get Castanya Pump Station back in service because the gravity flow that we could get from Sonoma County couldn't meet our contractual allotments when North Marin is pulling their contractual maximum allotment. So with Castanya Pump Station back in service, when we're both pulling our full loads in the summer, we estimate that with it back in service, we could import an additional, not additional, but actually what is entitled in our contracts, up to an additional 4,300 acre feet that we weren't able to import prior to Castanya Pump Station being out of service. So that was a critical project for us during the drought.
Right.
And then Fifth Avenue, downtown San Rafael, this was 2,700 feet of 18-inch welded steel pipe, cast iron, and that was also put in the early 1920s. And in coordination with one of their paving projects was a fire flow project. So this increased the, we had pipe in the road that was a little deficient for meeting fire flow requirements. So that was funded through our fire flow program. So I'm going to move on now to.
I have just a question, Crystal,
Yeah.
before you leave this. On the Costanza pump situation, you corrected yourself and said not additional. Technically, I think it's fair to call it additional water. We had a contract right to it, but it's water we previously could not receive. So it's additional water.
I think that's correct, Director Gibson. It is a very significant water supply project that we accomplished in a very short order, and to a significant benefit in terms of water supply. And as Crystal probably is going to touch on, we are looking at a phase 2 to even strengthen that reliability of the upgrade with a second pump and other enhancements as well. So it was a very key project.
Yeah.
I make another real brief comment about Castanya, and I double down on everything that's been said about it. It's a great project and well executed. Is just we talked before about naming something about Diet Stroh, and to me this would be a great project to name after Mr. Stroh because he had deep connections to both Sonoma and Marin. So. Right. I just wanted to put that out there for the board.
I think that's a terrific idea.
Nice idea.
Yeah.
That's a very nice idea. Thanks, Larry.
And he's the one that actually got the connection made to the Russian River.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
So I just think he's so key and has connections to both areas. It would be really
Right.
nice.
Yeah.
Nice, nice. Okay, we'll bring something back on that. Okay, and then now let's look at our expected expenditures for fiscal years 22 and 23 by asset class. So as in past years, the bulk of our investments have been in pipelines, and this breaks it out by asset class. Oh, sorry, didn't change, did it? There we go. With 16 million, we're expecting to hit for pipelines this year and 14 next. And I'm gonna go into more detail about the projects that are in each of these asset classes. But first, let's talk about funding. The capital maintenance fee for fiscal year 22 and 23, this is revenue that we expect. And next year, we plan on drawing down some of the fund that we have to help pay for the projects next year. As you know, we did transfer money from rate stabilization this year for a number of projects, namely Castanya Pump Station, East Bay, Intertie, and some preliminary design on Peacock Gap recycled water. Those were all funded out of rate stabilization reserves. Our fire flow this year, we're expecting to hit about 4.2. Next year, we're gonna do a couple extra fire flow projects because some years it's more or less the 4.5, which is the revenue that we get. And we'll take it from the fund, the available funds to do a couple extra fire flow projects next year. We are expecting we have grant awards. These are our actual awards that we've received for fiscal years 22 and 23. And we did get an announcement of state appropriations for Pine Mountain Tunnel. It's actually 2 million. This is an error here. And then we got board approval at a recent board meeting to move forward on applying for a WIFIA loan for Pine Mountain Tunnel, which would pay for 49% of next year's construction costs. Now, if we also put in for relatively large hazard mitigation grant of 21 million for Pine Mountain Tunnel. And if we do get that award, we wouldn't have to take out the funds for the WIFIA loan. So we'll know more. We won't know the results of that application until later this year. And connection fees are just our normal fees that we get for new service connections, and customer reimbursements is when we, let's say we install a service lateral for a new service connection, the customer will pay us back for that installation. All right, moving
Crystal,
forward.
Do we have any other grants that are pending that we may find out about that would come into play for next year?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, we have quite a few in the hopper. Matt Seges will be giving an update on grant applications at an upcoming board meeting. But yeah, the big one is the Pine Mountain Tunnel. We also have a $5 million Water Smart grant that we put in for AMI. So, and there's quite a few others.
Okay.
There's a number in the watershed for fire and fuels management as well. So this is the same data broken down into a pie chart, so you can see it in a different way. And as you see again, pipelines represent the bulk of our investments. But I want to look at it a different way going forward. These are actual projects. So, and the majority of this year's projects were 8 large projects took up. This is the this part of the pie from the dark blue down to the light green. That's 8 projects that represent the bulk of our investment this year. And as you note, there's also a big chunk called capital maintenance. And I want to talk a little bit about that because that's work that we do every year on our assets. And so I'm going to talk a bit about that. So just for to have a good discussion on our investments for this year, I'm going to talk about each of these 8 projects and a bit on capital maintenance. So here's capital maintenance. It's a significant investment that we make every year in all of the asset categories. And this is the breakdown of those investments per fiscal year, this fiscal year and next. But what it represents is the replacement of sort of smaller assets, system meters, pump motors, valves, generators, vehicles, chemical feed systems. I mean, there's a lot that goes into managing a water district, and the replacement of this equipment on life cycle replacements, it represents a big chunk of our investment every year, in the range of about $5 million. We have work on culverts. This is trails and road maintenance up in the watershed. We have all the instrumentation and software and hardware that so we can talk to our pump stations, our hundreds of remote sites that we talk to remotely and operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I just wanted to touch on that and move on to those other 8 projects that we've spent our money on this year. So first one is 3rd Street Pipeline Replacement Project. It's ongoing right now. You can see the cut down on 3rd Street. We've got a lot of night work coming up. We have about 5 or 6 weeks of night work coming up. And this is in coordination with the city to install 6,570 feet of new pipe. And by collaborating with the city on this project, it represented a savings of $674,000 in paving costs. So to be able to replace the pipe during their paving project, it saves us money on those paving costs. So we take advantage of that when we can, when it makes sense, when the leak history and the age and the criticality of the pipe deem that it's right for replacement, then we will jump onto a paving project and replace those pipes. So that project will continue into the next fiscal year, and the total cost is $4.5 million. Next project is East Blytheville, also currently in construction. This is another one in conjunction with a local city doing a paving project, and it's 4,400 feet of 8-inch pipe, replacing old cast iron from the 1920s that was too shallow. The vibration from all the paving work could have, jeopardized that pipe. And that's a $3 million project. Now this one, because we worked with the city to collaborate, we're saving close to $1 million in paving costs by replacing this pipeline now. So we moved this project, into the design to get it, to make sure that we had it during construction for their project. Next project, East Bay Intertie, of course, this was the big project that we were working on at the height of the drought to increase capacity through transferring imported water through East Bay mud system. Now this project is on hold pending environmental review, which we're currently conducting. And we're working on reallocating the material purchases to other capital projects. So we're working on that now.
Yeah, just a comment on that, Crystal, as well. For some reason, we have the public seems to be under the impression that we have passed on this project and it's off the table. And that's, of course, dead wrong. It's on hold, as you said, but that's, pending the environmental impact. But I don't know if there's any way we can get the message out or correct that, that it's not gone. It is on the table, a viable, potentially future project that we're looking closely at.
Director Gibson, one thing we can do that we have talked about among staff is at an upcoming meeting, provide the board an update on the environmental review process that would be informative to you and to the public. And of course, as you know, the intertie and a number of interties are part of the water supply assessment that we're doing as well. So we have 2 parallel efforts where this intertie is very much a piece of it, and we'll be bringing both of those to the board going forward.
I think, thanks, Ben, that's helpful. But to Jack's point, which I agree with, I think part of what would help is if we don't say it's on hold. I actually don't think it is on hold. I mean, the environmental review is a major part of capital processes. So I think, it's a small thing, but I would just say this project is moving forward and it's now an environmental review.
I think that's a better way to capture it, Director Kohler. I agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, so moving on, the next one I'd like to touch on is the Monterey Avenue Fire Flow Project. This is in San Anselmo, 5,800 feet of pipe. It was undersized pipe for fire flow needs and also aging. And it was in conjunction with a street overlay project, and that project was completed this year. Or it should be, completed. And then Ridge Road, another big project for us this year, 5,100 feet of 8-inch pipe, old cast iron pipe installed in 1953, part of the fire flow improvement project to ensure adequate fire flow in the event of an emergency.
Crystal, Which Ridge Road is this? Which part of the county is this in?
This is in Tiburon, Director Bragman.
Okay, thanks, Alex.
So last one, of course, Castanya. We did mention this earlier in conjunction with the drought. We got Castanya pump station back in service at a cost of $2 million, and that project is complete. And we've been running the pump station routinely during weekdays to make sure everybody's familiar with the operation of the pump station now that it's back in service. All right, and then fire and fuels management, a big part of our ongoing capital program, investing over $2 million a year in reducing fire risk in wildfire hazards in conjunction with enhanced ecosystem function. This was all started after the adoption of the EIR for the Biodiversity Fire and Fuels Integrated Plan. And we're moving forward with that project. And I'm very happy to say that we continue to get grant funding to enhance our work up in the watershed beyond what's funded through the Capital Maintenance Fund. All right, so now let's go into the projects for next year, starting July 1st. What are the large projects that we're going to be working on over the next fiscal year? Here's that pie chart again. And we've already talked about everything that's in gray. So these are projects that are just continuing through to the next fiscal year. And then the ones that are pink are all fire flow projects, increasing fire flow as part of the planned expenditures for our fire flow program. And I'm not going to go into details with those. They're great projects, but I did want to touch on the remaining 4 large projects here that we plan on getting going on next fiscal year. And so let me go into a little detail on those. There's an additional 50 projects on the list, and in the board packet is a cut sheet on each project if you're interested on any details on all of the whole program. So first one, Pine Mountain Tunnel replacement. We're finally getting going on this one. Back in 2009, the state said, you should probably take the tunnel out of service. There's potential water quality issues. It's, the roof is starting to crack and fail. It was built in 1910 to 1918, and we were using it no longer as a tunnel sending raw water from Alpine Lake, which what its previous use was. We actually capped it at the end, the Kent Lakes or the Alpine Lakeside, and we use it as a storage tank. So it just it's like a long cylindrical storage tank, but it's important for fire flow protection to Ross Valley. But we are replacing the tunnel with 2 million gallon pre-stressed concrete tanks on concrete pipe road, just downhill of the Sky Oaks Ranger Station. And this project is going to take 5 to 6 years to complete, mainly because of the spotted owl habitat that's nearby. We have a very short construction window of only 2 to 3 months each year to do work, such as not to disturb owl habitat. So we actually just awarded the first phase for earth movement and a soil nail wall to get ready the site for the start of construction. And that work will start this summer and then progress each year through to fiscal year 28, quite a while away. But we're really excited to get this project going.
Yeah.
It's
I want to congratulate you on the choice of the photograph. It's a great photograph, but it also illustrates the aging infrastructure that we're dealing with in general, that a lot of people don't appreciate,
Yeah, and this is one of the largest this probably is the largest capital project that we currently have going for the district, is this replacement of Pine Mountain Tunnel at a total cost of $25 million.
Mm-hmm.
So next one I wanted to highlight was the North Marin line. We're going to start design on this project. This is a very important pipeline from Kent Lake up to our treatment plant, the San Geronimo water treatment plant, raw water pipeline. It's ACCP pipe, concrete pipe. It's in the 100-year floodplain. There's a couple creek crossings that are seismically vulnerable. So it's time to, and many water districts around the Bay Area are replacing all of their ACCP pipe at this time. They have been doing it with large programs because this pipe, it's wire wrapped concrete, and when it fails catastrophically. It's not just a little crack in a welded steel pipe. It blows out. So, you know, we don't want that to happen here. So, you know, this project has been on our list as a priority project. We have allocated funding for design for next fiscal year. However, I do want to point out that the project we have yet to identify funding for the construction. So, and that's going to be part of Alicia's presentation in the next agenda item, is looking at long-term capital investments beyond what our baseline is. Because what I'm talking about today is the work that we're doing with the funding that we have. So we're going to go into design, and hopefully we'll figure out how to get this project constructed in the next few years. All right, so Frieda's Parkway is the next one. About 1,000 feet of 24-inch pipe, replacing with welded steel. There's a critical control vault in this area that's in people's backyards that we want to move so that we can access it with multiple intersections of different important pipelines. And so we're going to be replacing all the valves and putting in controls. It's for reliability of our water supply. We want to get these improvements put in place so that we can sort of change the direction of how the water flows under different operational scenarios. So that project is going to be constructed next year, hopefully finished at that time. And then the last one is Braid Boardwalk. This is an interesting project. This is a pipe that sort of hangs off of hangars across the marsh and provides water to a number of single family homes out on what's called Braid Boardwalk. These folks, I believe, have to walk to get to their houses on this boardwalk. And it's an old pipe. It's if it was to fail, well, the struts that hold up the pipe, if you were to go out there, you can see they're starting to rot and fall apart. So if this pipe was to fail, not only would we would lose water supply to those homes, but it would be an impact to the environment because of the chlorinated water into the marsh. So we've had this project in design for a while, and we're ready to move forward with construction next year. So that's the Braid Boardwalk project. And now, just closing up, I just want to talk about how we're getting the word out on all this great work that we're doing. We have been working interdepartmentally between our GIS group, our public information office, and engineering to put together a new interactive web tool where people can go online and see all the projects that we have currently in our capital program and what phase they're in. Each pin will be color coded to whether or not it's in design, construction, or it's been completed. And if you're curious to know what we're doing out there, you can hover over the pin and it'll show general cost and status of the project. But if you click on it, it'll open up a web page that has more details on the schedule, the project schedule, description of the project, what it is we're doing, the benefits of the project and why we're doing it, as well as a photo and a detailed map of the project itself. So this is really exciting because this is going to provide additional transparency to the community as to where their dollars are going in terms of investments in the system, and geographically you can see them as well. So I'm really excited that this is going to get launched in the next couple of weeks. So, okay, with that, I'll just summarize. So we have a very active CIP program with ongoing investments to maintain water system reliability. And the benefits from these investments span all parts of our service area. The CIP program focuses primarily on upgrading aging infrastructure, and upcoming improvements to online project information will better inform the public. Okay, so that's the end of the presentation.
You have a question, if I can. I may have missed it. You covered a lot there. But what is going on with the pipeline out to Peacock Gap Golf Course? Question one. And periodically I've heard about possible improvements on Las Calinas Sanitary District recycling effort. So generally recycling water, what are we doing?
Sure. Yeah. So Peacock Gap, the board did approve a contract to do essentially what's an alternatives analysis for the routing. We have 3 different routes, a northern route across the bay there, which is the most direct route as the crow flies, and then another route along San Pedro Road, North San Pedro Road, and a third route, a southern route through San Rafael, down Point San Pedro, and around Peacock Gap neighborhood up to the golf course there. And so that contract is almost complete. our consultants and internal staff have been meeting weekly with all different stakeholders, including the golf course, the county, BCDC, state water control board, state parks. We've had a number of meetings over the last 6 months with all the different stakeholders. And the consultant team is working on alternatives analysis with weighted criteria in terms of environmental impact and cost and constructability. And so that we're going to come up with a preferred alternative for the route. And that'll be presented to the board within the next couple of months at an upcoming operations committee. And the next step, of course, would take that 30% and preferred alternative and move towards environmental review. So that would be the next step that we'd have to do a consultant contract on to do that review and get it to the board. So, but the funding,
Crystal,
yeah.
oh, go ahead. I was going to hit the grant funding.
Yeah, but the funding for construction has yet to be identified. So, you know, while we can get through design with our existing baseline funding, the actual construction, we're going to have to be looking for grant funding and cost sharing for that project.
And we'll start that pursuit of grant funding as soon as we have this 30% design. We'll go full bore and pursue grant funding.
Great.
A
I just
question.
want to see if there's other board
Yeah.
questions. Okay.
And just, I'm going to limit it to just the one project, which is Phoenix Lake, which I just wrote down. That's page 41 of the description you sent out to the board in the packet, which is that I believe would actually get funded through flood zone 9. And whether we have contacts with the administrators of the flood zone.
Yeah,
and
we
whether-
just, yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we've been meeting with them regularly and we're trying to work out the sizing of the hydraulic event that would dictate how large of a pump station we would need to move water from Phoenix to Bontempe in ahead of a rain event, an atmospheric river of some sort. And that's going to dictate the costs, right? Because the larger the pump station, the larger the cost. And so we're going to put together a memorandum of understanding with the county. We've been working on that and we'll be bringing that back to the board in an upcoming meeting.
And then second question on that, Crystal, when this originally came up a few years ago, when Krishna was still GM, we approached them about doing some habitat improvement at Phoenix, which would involve excavating the end away from the dam, which is sort of filled in, because that would actually increase Phoenix's capacity a little bit, which would benefit the flood district as well as, you know, obviously, hopefully improving the habitat for the waterfowl and, you know, the other creatures that hang out in that area. So that's something I think that should be on the table. And I understand that a lot of the other flood zone projects have been put on hold because FEMA has basically announced a hold on many of the Ross Valley projects due to downstream impacts of upstream projects. So there may be a funding opportunity that arises from that. So just, I wanted to put that on the table. It's something I'm interested in pursuing and following up with Flood Zone 9 on. So
okay, we'll put
just
that on the table.
put that in, keep that in mind.
Okay.
Any other board comments on this item?
Yeah, I have a quick one. I'd just like to compliment you, Crystal, and Ben and Alex on providing the direction to move us out of the catch as catch can, what I would call the third world approach to engineering design of our water systems. You're bringing us into modern times, which is much appreciated and will be a good benefit to the community for a long, long time.
Yeah, if I could, Director Russell, I just wanted to add the really great work of what Crystal showed and Adrian touched on at the comms meeting of having that website with all our capital projects, with all the information on the projects. I do think over time, that's going to be a highly used site for the community to understand where their money's going generally and in their neighborhood.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would just want to echo these compliments. This is really, it's really important for us to be moving these projects forward because they obviously are core to water supply reliability. And we are dealing with drought and wildfire and other issues that put pressure on the reliability side of our mission. And so these projects are fundamental to that. I think the doing the outreach effort to explain to, again, our customers the importance of these projects. These aren't, it's sort of like when you have to redo your roof. Well, if you replaced your roof before it leaked, you kind of spent thousands of dollars and it really made no difference because it never broke. And and I think in that same way, people might have a hard time understanding why we're spending so much money on these projects before they break, but that's reliability. So great work, and really appreciate the outreach effort along with us.
Yeah, I'll just maybe finish off this item by agreeing with all of that and saying it's not only in addition to it being about reliability, I think it's also very much about resilience. I noticed, Crystal, you also indicated that this is mostly about aging infrastructure, replacing and upgrading that, which I think is fine. But I think you may want to, again, for purposes of being clear with the public, be clear that some of this is new, right? I mean, the ongoing work on the intertie, the work to make the Sonoma water supply more available. I would categorize that as not simply upgrading aging infrastructure, right? Those are new initiatives that are going to augment supply. I think the one thing that I would say is I'd like to see specifically, and maybe this is in the gray category, is some of that capital budget being allocated to our distributed long-term investments. As we've talked about before, it makes sense to move some of that into capital. People don't replace their toilets or their washing machines or their landscaping annually. So those really should not be booked as annual expenditures. So I'd like to see that unpacked and see the opportunity to be moving those rebates. Obviously, there are annual expenses as part of those programs like staff, but to the extent that the rebates themselves represent long-term investments in supply, in new supply, in resilience and reliability, it seems to me it's very, very important that we move some of that into capital. So I don't know if you're prepared to discuss that today, but if not, I'd like to see that come back to a board meeting very soon.
Okay, we'll bring it back. We do touch on it in the next presentation on long-term investments, so it's also there. But I hear you, it's the current investment that you would like to move.
It really is. I mean, we've been talking about cutting some of these programs that really should not be cut, and we're cutting them because of the strain specifically on the proposal is specifically because of the strain on the operating budget. And I agree, these are long-term investments, and therefore they should not be paid for exclusively out of current year operations as if they're, some sort of annual expense. So I don't think we want to put that off for the long term. These are programs that are more successful, as the data indicates, everywhere, elsewhere around the nation, when they are sustained and reliable and people learn about them and understand them. So I would definitely want to be seeing that in current year budgets. It's not that they need to be a huge expenditure, but since we're talking about a shift in how we think about them and talk about them with ourselves and with the public, I think having them in the next year's capital budget, at least as a line item, is very, very important. Okay, is there any public comment on this item, Terry? This is an information item, so there's no action, but we do want to take public comment.
Yes, there are two, Roger Roberts, then Larry Minikes. Mr. Roberts, please.
Yes, good morning. I believe that you still have additional investments required associated with the water treatment facilities, that has not been completed. And I was surprised I may be wrong. I was surprised that there were no projects in the list for water treatment facilities for earthquake proof and just finishing up the work that's been pursued for the past several years. If I'm wrong, that's fine. That's good news. But if there are some projects that still need to be done, why were they not included?
So before we go on, can somebody answer that?
Yeah, sure. We do have a treatment plant bundle project next year. That's a small components. Well, not necessarily small. It includes some chemical tank replacements as well. As far as the seismic work that Roger is referring to, the San Geronimo water treatment Clarifier project, I believe that is in the baseline, but it's in a future fiscal year. It's not next year. So you'll see that coming in future presentations as we gear up for that project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, but actually, what's one more? We do have a roof project next year at San Geronimo. That's hardening the structure from wildfire, but also it's leaking and we need to replace the roof. But that's also coming up next year.
Thanks, Crystal. Mr. Minikes, please.
Yes, good morning, and thank you, Crystal, for that presentation. And yes, fully on board on upgrading aging infrastructure. Agree with the comments that were made. I want to address two items. One is fire and fuels management and expenditure schedule and funding sources. And if what would be helpful, even though the funding isn't coming through MMWD, is to have a line item on where Measure C funds on the interface come into play to help reduce fuel load. It'd be helpful to see that the total that's actually being invested from both inside MMWD and then outside. And the second is the Pine Mountain Tunnel Replacement Project. That's looks like a 5-year project, which is going to bring a lot of heavy equipment through Fairfax. And I think it's going to inconvenience a lot of people. And I think the outreach there is going to be really important so people understand. We all know what the roads are like there, and it will be a difficult project to move a lot of heavy trucks with dirt and such through the town on a regular basis over the next 5 years. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further comments.
Okay. That brings us to, so I'm just going to thank staff again for an excellent presentation, and just the transparency is really helpful. And per Ben's comments, I think getting this all up on the website will be excellent. That brings us to item 4, an update on the capital.
It's frozen.
I think, Alicia, you could probably get going.
yeah.
It's like
Okay.
simply froze.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Alicia Irish here, our engineering manager and planning. I'm here this morning to give you an update on our 10-year financial plan. So I'll share my screen.
Alicia, if I could, I just wanted to note that the way staff is looking at this is really an ongoing discussion. There's nothing deterministic in what Alicia's going to be presenting. We aren't looking for decisions now. This just continues a discussion. And as Alicia will note, this recognizes part of the reason for the continuing discussion is the uncertainty on the direction that on the roadmap for water supply that will need to get integrated into this. So again, just part of the ongoing discussion and no decisions today as we move forward.
Thanks,
Alicia,
Glenn.
we see the preview slides.
Oh, sorry. Let me.
Yeah.
You never know what's going on here. All right. Is that better?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, great. So yes, this is the latest as part of the ongoing conversation with the board about the 10-year financial plan. As a reminder, the 10-year financial plan begins in fiscal year 24 and goes through fiscal year 33, and it builds upon and is over and above the existing 10-year baseline CIP. This chart here shows the annual average asset class allocation for the various asset classes. And it's showing an average annual total expenditure of $25.6 million. This is funded through the CMF or capital maintenance fee, as well as the fire flow improvement program. On an annual basis, approximately or a little less than half of our expenditures go towards our pipeline replacement program, with an annual investment of $4.5 million coming from our fire flow improvement program. A little over $2 million will go towards our pump stations. $5 million to our storage tanks, a little less than $1 million towards our treatment plants for minor capital maintenance projects, $2.7 million towards our watershed, and a little over $3 million to general improvements, which goes towards our facilities, program management, and IT. This schedule here shows the layout of some of the larger projects that will be taking place within our 10-year baseline CIP. Some of these projects have started this year or will be starting in fiscal year 23. For example, Pine Mountain Tunnel has started this year and will be scheduled to be completed in fiscal year 28. It will then be followed up by the Ross Reservoir Tank Replacement Project. There are also some tank recoating projects within this 10-year period, Mill Valley tanks and Alto tanks, as well as a programmatic steel tank recoating program. There's also scheduled to be the replacement of the remainder of the redwood tanks in our system, as well as 3 discrete pump station projects, Tocoloma, San Quentin Pump Station, and Federal Works Pump Station. In addition to that, we'll also be rehabilitating 5 other pump stations in our system, as well as doing the San Anselmo Hub Regulator, an overhaul or SAP replacement, as well as our pipeline replacement program at a nominal rate of 7 miles per year. In 2021, we took the board through a series of workshops, and during those workshops, we laid out various investment scenarios that were over and above our baseline CIP. The first of these scenarios, the reliability scenario, includes infrastructure upgrades and repairs necessary to improve the water system reliability, with a focus on projects that protect public safety through seismic upgrades, extending the useful life of existing infrastructure, and accelerating wildfire mitigation and adaptation efforts. The next investment scenario, resilience, includes infrastructure advancements needed to prepare the district for future conditions through accelerating the replacement of aging infrastructure, updating watershed recreation facilities to protect natural resources, and diversifying water supply while establishing critical system redundancy. The highest investment scenario, contemporary, included infrastructure and technological advancements necessary to modernize the district's water system, to better prepare to withstand the extremes of climate change and provide the district with disaster infrastructure to support ongoing operations during emergency events. While these workshops were taking place, the district was in the process of completing its hazard mitigation plan. And that plan, along with the critical risk assessment completed in 2018, identified a number of projects, some of which are included in our baseline CIP and some are currently unfunded. The baseline funded projects include Pine Mountain Tunnel, Ross Reservoir Tank Replacement, Tocoloma Pump Station, the Wolfback Ridge Highway 101 Pipeline Crossing in Sausalito, the roof replacement at San Geronimo, the replacement of the district's remaining redwood tanks, the San Anselmo Hub Regulator Replacement Project, and Castanya Pump Station. The unfunded projects include Smith Saddle Tank Replacement, Wildfire Structure Hardening at the district's pump stations, the North Marin Line Pipeline Replacement Project, system-wide implementation of AMI, the replacement of the district's clarifiers at San Geronimo, seismic retrofits of some of our welded steel tanks, the Peacock Gap recycled water line, and Sulahuli electrification. During these workshops, the board ultimately settled upon a hybrid recommendation, which was the result of ongoing conversations with the board. And it included the following projects. The North Marin Line project, which is a project that replaces about 5 miles of pipeline from the bottom of Kent Lake to the San Geronimo treatment plant. The North Marin Line is currently the sole transmission line from the bottom of Kent and Acacia Lakes to San Geronimo treatment plant. And if this line were to fail, there would be no water feeding San Geronimo. The next project, seismic retrofits, includes seismic retrofits at some of the district's steel tanks and includes the installation of anchoring and flexible connections. Performing this project will increase the performance reliability of these tanks during a seismic event. The Smith Saddle tank replacement project includes the replacement of the existing Smith Saddle tanks with 2 new 5 million gallon tanks. The existing tanks are currently in poor condition and are in need of replacement. The recoating of 12 additional steel tanks builds upon the baseline recoating program of the steel tanks. And as we learned about in previous workshops, welded steel tanks can be recoated to extend their useful life. There are currently 31 tanks that are overdue for recoating out of the district's 75. And performing this project will leave the number of overdue tanks at 31 at the end of the 10-year period, as opposed to increasing to 43 tanks or 57% of the district's steel tank inventory. The structure hardening of 20 pump stations includes hardening the exterior of these pump stations through the use of non-combustible materials, such as concrete blocks, metal roofs, and screens. And hardening the structures of these pump stations will increase their resiliency in the event of a wildfire, increasing the probability that they will be able to perform during a wildfire event. The San Geronimo Clarifier Replacement Project proposes to replace the existing clarifiers at San Geronimo, which currently lack lateral resistance and are vulnerable during a seismic event. The Wildfire Preparedness is a project that takes place along our watershed and is a planning effort to ensure that the district is adequately prepared to evacuate the watershed if needed, respond to an incident, and recover from a potential wildfire. This project will ensure that the district is adequately prepared to respond to a wildfire on the watershed and will be able to recover quickly. Enhanced Conservation Program C is a legacy title that's been carried over from the previous workshops, but it was the most robust conservation program presented. And it's a program that will build upon the district's current conservation programs currently offered, as well as add additional programs such as a leak repair contractor service, landscape design assistance, as well as leaving the turf rebate at $3 per square foot. AMI includes system-wide implementation or complete conversion of the district's customers' meters to AMI. This project will allow for proactive leak identification, as well as readily available consumption data. The valve exercising program proposes to reestablish the district's valve exercising program for the district's 15,000 valves to ensure their functionality when needed. This project or program will minimize the public impact for shutdowns for customers and provide a more reliable system. Performing this program will ensure that these valves do not fail prematurely due to lack of use, as well as minimize water loss, so that when valves were anticipated to work during a main event and happen to do not work, we will ensure their functionality. The costs presented here are the costs that were shown to the board during May 2021. And since that time, staff has performed more refined cost estimates on these projects. And we currently estimate the new total for this scenario to cost an additional $168 million over the 10-year period. It's notable that the Peacock Gap Recycled Water Line and Suluhuli electrification projects are not currently included in the scenario. And I would say more important is that none of the recommended projects that would potentially come out of the strategic water supply assessment that's currently underway aren't included as well. So this schedule here is just an example of how these projects could be laid out, with the understanding that this schedule and this scenario is dynamic, namely because they do not include the outcome of the strategic water supply assessment. A number of these projects, we believe, have a really great opportunity to be funded through outside sources. 4 of these projects highlighted here, district staff believe have really high grant potential. 2 of the projects, the wildfire and structural hardening of pump stations, as well as system-wide AMI, we currently have or are working on requests for outside funding. And we will be pursuing the seismic tank retrofits and the North Marin line in the future. about 40% of this proposed scenario, AMI and enhanced conservation, are to address the district's program of demand management. And we really believe that this scenario of these hybrid recommendations are over and above our existing baseline CIP, and we will be coming to the board for future conversations as we further define these projects. So in summary, these hybrid recommended projects are a total $168.5 million over the baseline. District staff will continue to aggressively pursue outside funding. In recent history, we have been much more successful with outside funding sources than we have in the past. Since July 2020, the district has received over $21 million in grants, state and federal funding appropriations, and low interest loans. We currently have over $62 million in requests including $22 million for Pine Mountain Tunnel through a hazard mitigation grant. We will be using this hybrid recommendation for a COSA planning process, during which we will consider balancing between rate and debt funded capital. We will continue to update the board as these projects get further defined and as we continue to further refine this 10-year financial plan. That is the end of my presentation.
Thanks. That was really well done, Alicia. Thank you so much. I want to first go to board comments and then we'll have public comments. Any board comments on this presentation for the 10-year plan? Larry, I think we can't hear you. Yeah, you're muted. Larry Bragman.
Oh, sorry. On the 168.5 million over baseline, is that over our baseline about 25 million a year?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And the 168 is over the full 10 years. So
it's over the 10-year period, 24 to 33.
Right. So annually it's right around 16.
Okay. Okay. And not including any supply augmentation that we may.
Yeah, this scenario does not include any of the outcome of the water supply assessment.
Okay. That's all I had. Thanks.
Maybe if I can jump in, two things. I have a hard stop at 11, so I'm gonna need to drop off at that point. But this is I'm glad we're coming back to this, though. The timing is odd with our water supply assessment pending. It's really an important part of I think our 10-year plan, and so I think it's hard to view these things, especially sort of the original scenarios that Alicia, you showed at the start of sort of the different categories of increasing spending and the associated sort of theory or strategy around each of the different levels without the results of our assessment. So I'm hopeful that we can come back to this. We need to, I think, have a 10-year plan that we really needs to guide us and should be part of our COSA process. So I'm not sure if this is kind of more of a process question, which is how can we continue to provide necessary guidance about future expenditures while we have got some pretty important things pending in terms that could really shape how we look at a 10-year financial plan.
Yeah, Director Schmidt, what will be as the water supply assessment takes shape with decisions, we'll be coming back and reviewing the 10-year plan with the board in terms of how it could fit in. Of course, the projects we're looking at, depending how things play out, are pretty large, but they're also long-term investments, both in terms of planning, design, environmental work. So once we get a better feel for that, we'll be able to see how the project or set of projects may fit into this, and we'll bring different options back to the board to consider.
But are we looking to adopt the 10-year plan at this point, or are we? What are we trying to do here with the finalization of a 10-year plan? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's a good question. I really wouldn't call it finalization, and maybe that was the term was used. This is really an informational item, part of ongoing discussion. with the recognition that we do have more steps ahead, particularly in regards to the water supply assessment. So we aren't looking for any decisions, just any thoughts or feedback you may have.
Got it. I think that, you know, I'll just say, you know, because I'm providing comments right this second, you know, Alicia, the way you described sort of the last, you know, and the highest, you know, level of investment, there were so many things about what you were saying in terms of modernizing our district to be resilient to wildfire and climate change. That's really, you know, that almost, it's hard not to say, well, that's what we got to do, because we're certainly not going, we need to be resilient against wildfire, and we need to be resilient against climate change. So I think that those, you know, those categories, just I'm trying to think of how to give instruction to the right lens through which I think we need to pick the way we're going to invest in the next 10 years. And obviously resilient, you know, meeting, you know, safe and reliable water supply is foundational, but then how are we getting, you know, how are we improving on, you know, on our capital maintenance and replacement, and as well as building in resilience? I think that's the part that I have yet to really see, I think, a strategic vision for how to see our different levels of investment to advance those very important core things that are so foundational to our mission. So I know that this is still in development, but I think that as we do need to move obviously toward completing a 10-year plan, I think we need to give some thought to maybe how we bin those different categories in a way that is a little bit more clear and shows really the trade-offs, because we, you know, if we're going to spend more money, we need to be able to explain to our customers why we are making a greater investment and why it is a wise choice to do. And so I think we just, I would really look to us to give some thoughts about how to present that.
So I think those are helpful comments, Monty. I think along those lines, I want to thank staff, then your team and Alicia and others for bringing this forward now. I actually think having this foundation at this time is actually fantastic and great, because it really does inform, you know, where we want to go with the, you know, with the water supply assessment. You know, I think it's fine. We've been having a lot of meetings on the assessment, and I think those have, you know, given a rise to perception in some places that that's all we're doing. So I think having this laid out right now is, I'll just say for myself as a board member, ideal, because there is this very large universe of things that are ongoing that we need to keep doing, that will be necessary regardless of which direction we go with that water supply assessment. We may wind up reprioritizing, moving some things around, but I think having clarity for the board and the public about where the staff's coming from in terms of those long-term additional very necessary investments, you know, I think is really quite critical and very, very timely. Do we have other board comments on this item before we go to public comment? Okay, public comment, Terry?
Roger Roberts, then Larry Minikes. Mr. Roberts, please.
Yes, thank you for this presentation. A couple of comments. I think one of the issues that you're struggling with is the fact that over time, it's a moving target because you get continued depreciation of your capital assets that the story 5 years from now is not the same story that we're going to have today. So you need to be on an increasing capital investment over time in order to catch up. And that's an unfortunate fact of the nature of the situation. And so I think you need to be thinking in those terms. And so I'm not at all sure that this plan really is going to advance the situation for the district in terms of its the integrity of its capital system. I have an individual comment which I think is important relative to the hardening of the pump stations. Don't use cinder block. In a wildfire situation, cinder block disintegrates at 550 degrees Fahrenheit. And the temperatures in Wildfire reach well over that figure. And I'm not sure that hardening the pump stations with cinder block is the proper decision. And I think you need to take another look at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Minikes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Alicia. Just one point. You know, we're going through right now historic inflation. And I would assume that a utility is more sensitive to inflation than, say, individuals, that it has a multiplier effect. And I'm curious if this is going to be factored in, or if this is already factored in into the equations. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Ed Jamison.
I'm sorry, can we just get a quick response to that before we move on?
Go ahead, Alicia.
That's part of the reason of the increase in cost that was presented between last May and today. Prices have increased for construction. That's the largest portion of our cost of our projects. And that, you know, namely the North Marin line jumped significantly. So I would say, yes, that is being taken into account.
Thank you.
Mr. Jamison.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. In watching the capital planning process last year, it became very apparent that the district has in the past underinvested in capital projects, putting us all at risk here in Marin. Going on to the proposal today, spending an extra $36 million on what is called enhanced conservation is a waste of money if consultant Mr. Mayor's presentation 2 weeks ago showing minimal opportunities was correct. This $36 million is a waste of your ratepayers' money. Earthquake hardening, the Clarifier, and other such actions are much more worthy projects. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further comments.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to step away just for a second. I apologize. So we are on to our next agenda item, which is the monthly financial update.
Hello, my name is Shelley Riley. I'll be presenting that. I'm the acting finance manager. Let me just share my screen here. So this is the monthly financial update as of April 30th, beginning with revenues. So as of April 30th, overall revenue is about 75% of total. Water revenue is slightly decreased at 70%. At this year, if revenue tracked linearly, would be at about 83%. I will go into water revenue in a few slides as well as in the forecast later on. Other revenue is at 4.8 million. This large increase is due to the one-time COVID relief funds of about 2.1 million. For total operating revenue, about 73%. Fire flow fee revenue is at 96% and capital revenue is at 81%. So the water sales revenue is broken into 3 categories: water sales, service charges, and watershed fees. As you can see here, water sales is about 65% of the budget and is definitely fallen behind this year due to multiple reasons, mainly conservation. Service charges and watershed fees are tracking right about a budget at 81% for the year. This graph is the monthly water sales month by month compared to last fiscal year. The good news on this graph is that, as you can see, in February, March, and April, the blue bars represent a slightly higher than last year comparison. This is mainly due to the drier than normal beginning of the year we had in January, February, March. As you all recall, our monthly billing is on a 2-month lag, so this is why we're seeing this just slightly delayed. So the year-to-date as of April for water billed is less than last year at about 22% comparatively. This is primarily due to single-family homes. They're down about 26%. For tiered consumption, you can see for fiscal year 22, it is the lowest of the past 7 years. Fiscal year 16 and 17, we were also in a drought for comparison. The interesting factor here is tier 1 for fiscal year 22 is about 15% less than last year. But for tiers 2, 3, and 4, we see anywhere from a 45 to 55% reduction this year, mainly due to the conservation efforts. This chart is the outstanding water accounts aging this April compared to last April. As you can see, currently we have about $2.2 million of outstanding bills, about 36% less than last fiscal year, with all categories lower than we saw last year. Moving into expenditures. For personnel services, we are about 78% of the budget, same with maintenance and operating expenses. Financial costs and capital are tracking right at about 83 as expected. Some of that is due to that these are just a function of accounting. Total operating expense is at 89% or $73.5 million as of April. The fire flow projects are at 4.3 million, which includes the encumbrances, so money that we have set aside for these projects but haven't actually got bills for yet, which is about 56% of the total. District projects are about 25.9 million or 72% of the total. But as you saw from Crystal's presentation earlier, we expect these numbers to jump up over the next couple of months by year end. So leaving total expenditures about 76% of the total budget. Fund balances as of April, so the restricted designated funds, which is comprised of workers' comp, general liability, is pretty steady at 17.7 million. The rate stabilization fund continues to be at 2.3 million. Fire flow 3.3, pension reserves 2 million, capital fund at 25 million. The operating fund is at 24.1 million. As you can see, this has fallen over the last few months of this fiscal year, mainly due to the backfill of revenue. So the operating fund balance to budget is 3 months, meaning that if we were to no longer receive any revenue, we would have about 3 months of reserves to cover all expenditures. The debt service coverage is 1.4 million projected this year. And the outstanding debt again is 146 million. So moving into the drought impacts and financial projections. So to go into further detail on the water sales revenue, we would expect April to have about 49.4 million in water sales. We're currently at 37.9 million for about a 20% decrease, or about $11.5 million deficit on the year. This is just a graphic representation of the same data. The blue line represents the budget at 58.5 million on the year. The lighter green line, July through April, is the actual results. And then as you can see, the line splits for the two different scenarios. The darker green line is 5% conservation, which would end the year at 46.6 million, or about $11.9 million less than the budget. The darker blue line is 20% conservation, which would end the year at 45.2 million, or about $13.3 million less. So to put that in context with all of operating revenue, you could see under the two various scenarios that at 5% conservation level, we would end the year at about a $10.4 million deficit. And at 20% conservation, we would end the year at $11.8 million deficit. Some of the losses in sales, water sales, is offset by that $2.1 million we received from the COVID relief fund. Water service charges and watershed management fees are coming in right about budget, just slightly less for both of those categories.
Can I ask, I know we spoke, could you go back just for a second? I know we spoke last time about including avoided costs here. Are we moving in that direction, or have we not gotten there yet?
We are moving in that direction. Unfortunately, I think some of that data is still being refined. And I don't know if it will change these numbers significantly at this point.
Okay, thanks.
So for operating expenditures, we expect to end the fiscal year with a $4.8 million in personnel savings, again, due to vacancies and retirements we've had this year. We are purchasing about $4 million of additional water. The water conservation rebate program is expected to end the year at $1.8 million. All of this additional budget has come from the rate stabilization fund. The other categories of expenditures are expected to come right in line with the budget. We did hear a presentation recently about the unbudgeted paving costs. We expected those to be about $300,000 over the budget, but we have found savings in other operating costs to cover that increase. So we expect to end the year at about $89 million, about $400,000 over the budget. So to summarize all that and its effect on the operating reserves, we began the year at 32.6 million. With the 20% conservation level, it would have an $11.8 million revenue loss with $400,000 of additional expenditures, plus the increase from the rate stabilization fund of 1.5 million, ending the year at 21.9 million, which is about $10.7 million less than the beginning of the year, a decrease of about 33% in reserves. So moving forward into next fiscal year, here's 4 various scenarios based on the 2 conservation levels. At 20% conservation, we would expect a little over $12 million loss in revenue. At 5% conservation, it's about a $3 million loss. Scenarios 1 and 3 also include unbudgeted expenditures, including the additional purchase of water for $6.6 million. If we had to pump the Suluhuli Reservoir to be approximately $1.5 million. And if we had the additional paving costs that we couldn't find savings for, to be about $300,000 for total additional expenditures of $8.4 million. You can see how that affects the reserves under the various 4 scenarios, the worst case being scenario 1, ending the year at 1.3 million. So this is just a historical graph of the operating fund balances at year end. You can see fiscal year 22 would end the year at approximately 21.9 million, the lowest it's been over the past 3 years, and the various scenarios for fiscal year 23, all considerably less than prior history. So the district is considering a few approaches to help this financial strain. They're looking to defer asset replacements, including vehicles, equipment, pumps, and generators, delay filling open positions. At this point, we have 19 openings and including 13 seasonal hires. Senior management is looking at each of these positions and weighing potential short-term consequences of leaving these open.
Shelley, could I just jump in on this slide, if that's
Sure.
okay?
Yeah.
This is just to share with the board and the public, you know, from what you saw in the past couple slides, we aren't just sitting on our hands. We're looking, and it's a longer list, at a range of expenditure controls. We aren't saying at this point, excuse me, that we're necessarily going to be doing any or all of these. We're just developing a list that we want to begin to bring to the board so you can see some of the potential opportunities we have in scaling things back or deferring some costs to manage the cash flow issue that we may run into under that worst case scenario.
So to continue, possibly delaying the watershed recreation management implementation plan, delay Lagunitas Creek streambed sediment monitoring work, slow down the completion of the biological inventories planned under the BFFIP, scale back repairs on watershed road, trail, and boat ramp, transition on the front bill inserts from bi-monthly production to quarterly, reduce customer giveaways, and also evaluate possible sale of surplus property. So in summary, the district has faced many financial challenges in fiscal 22 and continuing into fiscal year 23. The severity of the impact obviously is dependent on rainfall, water conservation levels, and unbudgeted expenses. And as been mentioned, we are looking at targeted actions to reduce expenditures going forward. And that is the end of the slideshow.
Thanks very much. It was very helpful. Board comments on this item. I'm mindful that it's after 11. A few of us have hard stops. I'm past 5 minutes past mine, but I just want to see how much conversation we've got on this before we go to public comment.
I think the projects that are, being considered for deletion seem fairly minimal, not to criticize it, but just to put it in context with our overall budget deficit. And I guess the question is, if we're going to go into another cost of service analysis, whether we're going to have to be looking at increasing the baseline service charge to cover operating expenses, because I really don't, I just don't see water consumption bouncing back in 1 year to pre-drought levels. In other words, we may need to make some structural changes in our cost of service analysis.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a good point, Director Bragman, and we'll be taking a look at different sets of assumptions, including the ramp up or not of water sales.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a very big rebound in 1 year, but that's not to say it couldn't happen. But given our climate change concerns and everything else going on, it just would seem that we're going to have to look in another direction.
Okay, thank you for that. And I agree. Other board comments before we move on to public comment? I'm seeing everybody else is muted, so I'm assuming not. Terry, public comments on this item?
Yes, Roger Roberts and Larry Minikes. Go ahead, Mr. Roberts.
Hello again. What this presentation tells me is that at your current water rate and customer use of water, you are operating well below your break-even point. And you need to know what your break-even point is in order to determine what to do in the future to get to break even. And I think it's timely that you do that. And I would recommend that you do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Minikes, please.
I also want to come back to the comment I made earlier that you guys kind of look like geniuses now for buying all that pipeline early, but before rates went crazy, and I mean before inflation really kicked in, and so that looks like a savings there. But on approaches to help address financial strain, and this is to Director Bragman's comment, is one item that should be added is increase rates to cover this. You're seeing this at other districts around the Bay Area and elsewhere, and it really looks like time to look at that seriously again. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no further comments.
sorry, I think that has brought us to the end of our agenda. I'm just checking here very quickly. Yeah, I think we're good. Thank you to the staff and to everybody who participated. See you soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, you guys.